let's get into this fucking matchup. Indianapolis Colts. Now, let's talk about the potential matchup of the week, and that's the Colts versus the Steelers. Now, this is going to be a badass game. I'm really looking forward to this one right here. And what we got so far is that, obviously the Colts are favored by only 3 points, and this is actually the highest point total of the season. But before we get into that, let me talk about the Colts real quick. Colts are 7-1, being the best team, having the best record in the league right now, which the last time they did that was back in 2007 with Peyton Manning after their Super Bowl run. Jonathan Taylor is having an MVP-like season. He's going freaking crazy. Daniel Jones is proving everyone wrong, which is exactly what I thought this whole time. I said, and I quote, he is going to have a Sam Darnold-like season. And that's coming from a freaking Giants fan who always had faith in him. I just knew that on the Giants, it was never going to last because he was dealt with so many bad cards with the coaching staff, with the O-line, with the receiving weapons, all being terrible. And so now he comes into a system, a whole fresh new system where he is now shining and looking like possibly the comeback player of the year if it wasn't for Christian McCaffrey. But one take that I do have from the Colts is that the Colts have an easier schedule, right? Their toughest matchups were against the Broncos, which they won by 1, and the Rams, which they lost by 7. And they could have potentially won that game had Adonai Mitchell not fumbled that ball before crossing the end zone. Besides that, they beat a depleted Chargers team, and they only won by 4 against a Cardinals team with Jacoby Brissett, no Marvin Harrison Jr., and a bunch of backup running backs. So one of the key takeaways that I have for this team is that they do kind of struggle against tougher defenses, right? And that was pretty much obvious with the Cardinals game. Besides that, the Colts are facing a few injuries, which, on Wednesday they had 9 players who did not practice. Now, some of that was due to rest, but for the most part, a lot of these players are dealing with some type of injury. I'm talking about Nick Cross, Josh Downs, Samson Ebukman, Kenny Moore, Grover Stewart, just to name a few. Now, on the other side, let's talk about the Steelers, who are coming off a disappointing loss to the Packers, where they had the lead in the first half. But besides that, most of the money was on the Steelers to win, so Vegas cleaned up pretty well on Sunday Night Football. And besides that, the Steelers kind of look good on offense without many receiving options. They finally get back Calvin Austin, who was injured this whole time. Roman Wilson decided to show up, which last year he was a rookie, didn't play his whole season because of a season-ending injury. Now he's starting to pick up some stride and looking like he's going to get more opportunities. Besides that, they did face a few injuries during last week's game. Deshaun Elliott, safety, season-ending injury. D-tackle, I can't think of his name, but there was a D-tackle that they had a starter that was hurt. Pat Freiermuth left the game early with some type of injury. Looks like Isaac Seumalo was hurt and he was out. I'm not sure if I think he might be done for the season. I'm not sure. I think it's him that was dealing with some type of pectoral issue. Might have torn his pectoral, but they did hold the running game to under 100 yards rushing. Josh Jacobs only had 33 rushing yards in that game. On the other hand, they did give up 360 yards in the passing game. Now, they also, they have one of the toughest schedules in the league, and they were still finding a way to get a bunch of wins. Now, let's switch. Let's turn over to the matchup, and let's see how these two teams fare side by side. The Colts are 6-2 against the spread. Steelers are 3-4 against the spread. Now, this is actually the highest point total for both teams in this season. That point total being over 50 and a half. That point total being over 50, being at 50 and a half. And in the last 3 games for the Colts and 2 games for the season, the point total has gone over 50 points. The Colts' total points have gone over 50 in 5 times this season, and that's due to, easier matchups, while the Steelers have gone over 50 points in that game 3 times to the Jets, Bengals, and Packers. Now, the matchup comparison indicates that the Colts offense has an advantage over the Steelers defense. Steelers defense matches up well versus the Colts offense. And one thing that I noticed is that the Steelers kind of lack speed in the secondary, where the Colts have some speed on there. They have Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. They got to play Adonai Mitchell if they really want to win this game, because he's going to be that difference maker that's going to take that over the top. And I basically called that last week with the Packers. I said that the Steelers are going to be able to stop the run game, or at least slow down the run game a lot. And where the Packers need, for them to get that win, they're going to have to find a way to basically use the speed from their receivers to get past those older, experienced DBs. And so that's why when they had Christian Watson back, that helped it out a lot. Matthew Golden's one of the faster ones. Tucker Kraft is really fast for a tight end. But that all that helped, So that's what I'm saying with the Colts. If they really want to beat the Steelers, it's going to be tough for them to run the ball, because that front 7 is very solid on the Steelers. Their linebackers are freaking fast. Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson, both ran like 4.4s. So, and another thing is that those safeties, Juan Thornhill and Chuck Clark, are tackling DBs. Even Jalen Ramsey, and Joey Porter. They're all not afraid to get dirty. They're all good at tackling. So they're good at stopping the run. But where they struggle, like I said, is against wide receivers with some speed. So the Colts need to take advantage of that. Now, looking onto the public bets, 90% of the public bets are on the Colts money line. 62% of the bets are on the under, while 75% of the bets are on the Colts spread -3. Now, I don't know about you, but every time I see something like that, I always like to fade the public, because in the long term, if you fade the public, you will be profitable. So, my prediction for this game is that this will be the game of the week. It might even be a better game than the Bills and Chiefs, but I mean, the Bills and Chiefs had history for the past 5 years. They played each other like 8 times in the past 5 years, and their record is 4-4 against each other. So that might be a little bit different, but the Colts and Steelers matchup this week, I think, is going to be a badass game. Tough, hard-hitting game in the trenches. The Colts O-line is very great. Probably one of the best, if not the best, O-line in the league this year. But then they're going to be going against a top 3 defensive front, that doesn't fuck around. So it's going to be a tough one for them. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor and Daniels. This is going to be their biggest challenge yet, versus that Steelers defense and Mike Tomlin. That's a key thing, because Mike Tomlin, one of the best coaches, especially on defense, out there. And if the Colts tend to struggle against stronger defenses, expect this matchup to be closer than you expect. So, my prediction for this game, it's potential upset. Steelers have a chance to win this game. I guess I'm going with the spread on this one. I'll take an alternate spread at +4.5, because you never know. Colts might end up winning by 4 points. And besides that, with the player props, I do like, if the Colts want to win this game, Daniel Jones might have to scramble. So potentially over 20 yards rushing for Daniel Jones, which he's done 3 times this season. Jonathan Taylor, potentially under, like under 100 rushing yards, which has happened 4 times this season, all the way down to potentially under 80 rushing yards this game, which he's done this season 3 times. He's gone under 80 3 times this season. And if there were ever a game for the under to happen, it would be this game. Now, don't even get distracted. Don't think about last week versus the freaking Titans, one of the worst defenses in the league. Of course he's going to ball out. He freaking scored 3 touchdowns on them like 3 times in a row or something like that. So, this is a completely different game. That's why we say any given Sunday matchups, sometimes the numbers lie because, this week you're going to face a top 5 defense. Doesn't matter what you did in the past. Doesn't matter how many rushing yards you average per game. This might be one of those games where Jonathan Taylor is going to go under 100 yards, under 80 yards. So that's something I'm looking at, and I'm probably most likely going to bet those ones. Another thing, since Tucker Kraft scored 2 touchdowns last week, those safeties are kind of slower. I think all those DBs are going to have their hands full with the wide receiving options that they have. Expect Tyler Warren anytime touchdown, which for some reason last week for National Tight End Day, he didn't freaking celebrate, right? He didn't score. So expect a Tyler Warren anytime touchdown. And my last prediction, Chris Boswell over 2.5 field goals made. He is one of the best kickers in the league. Last year I had him on fantasy, and he was the best kicker in the league. So, even if the Steelers can't find a way to score, as long as they get past, 40, obviously past the 50, but if they could get to the 40, Chris Boswell can hit those 50-yard plus field goals. So that's what I got for this week. Let me know what you guys think. I'm very confident in this game being one of the best games of the week, potentially the game of the week. So let me know what you guys think. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.